Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who usually do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. But today we are three friends. Because we have Travis Baldrae on just to discuss Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bonedust. Travis, welcome to the pod.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to discuss these books and just your background. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, both with, how you got into audiobook narration and in writing these two books?
So I was originally a game developer. I did that for a couple of decades and made action RPGs. Fate and Torchlight are probably the things that I'm best known for. I did that for a long time, was good at it. And at some point I started reading audiobooks on the side, kind of as a hobby. And then I discovered that I really liked it. And after several years went on, I decided that I was going to retire and do that instead. So in my mid-40s, I quit developing video games and switched full-time to narrating audiobooks, which I really enjoy. And that's still ostensibly my full-time job. And back in 21, in the summer, a narrator friend of mine, Avon Shorekind, convinced me to do National Novel Writing Month again, because I had a wasteland of failed ones in my history. And for the first time, I decided I would outline something, which was an unhappy discovery that I have to outline things. And that's what ultimately resulted in Legends and Lattes, which was written in the November 2021 NaNoWriMo. And because I work with authors all the time, I thought, well, I'll just publish it. I'll go through all the process. I'll see how all of it works. I'll understand the machine because I like to learn stuff. And I did that. I went through an editorial process. I commissioned art. I laid the thing out in vellum and I released it. And then nothing went as expected after that. So that's why I'm here now, I guess.
Oh, that's exciting. So you are a secret plotter and not a pantser, as you thought.
Really, unfortunately, I was convinced that I was a pantser, and then enough evidence accrued that I was not.
That's amazing.
So you had kind of a baptism by fire with publishing, because you went into self-publishing because you just kind of wanted to have the fully author experience. And can you kind of take us through like what happened after you self-published a little more?
It was very gentle fire. If it was a baptism by fire, it was very gentle fire. The self-publishing launch went really well. I think a large part of that is thanks to Seanan McGuire boosting it when it first popped up, and then to book talkers and booktubers and all of the other book social media suffix things. So it initially did really well, and I didn't need to do anything else. And I would never have considered taking it to traditional publishing. I just couldn't imagine that I would ever do such a thing. But I was approached after the fact by 3 agents separately to take it traditional, which I guess happens more and more often these days because social media is sort of a bit of a barometer for how a book is going to be received. So you can kind of limit your risk and get something you already know is going to work. So like Senlin Ascends and Rage of Dragons and the Atlas 6 are all self-pub, the traditional published conversions. And since I wasn't expecting to like quit my day job and become a full-time author, I was like, why not? What have I got to lose? I might as well see how it works both ways. And how often can you see how it works both ways with the same book? Not very often. So I said yes. And Stevie Finnegan of Xeno in UK is my agent. She's awesome. She lives on an aeroboat. She's super cool. And she took it out on submission. And I think within 48 hours, Tor UK had come back with an offer. And I've always liked Tor. I'm a big fan of Tor because I think they treat their books really well and they have such a great breadth of approach. And I have a very high opinion of them. So I was like, why not? Again, it was a great offer and why not? So that's what I did. And then I began discovering how the publishing world actually works. I didn't even know there were 2 Tors. There's a Tor UK and a Tor US. I didn't know this. I didn't know they were separate, but kind of also kind of not separate and owned by the same company. And they work together, but still separate.
I weirdly enough learned about different imprints from the Sutton Foster TV show Younger, and that's the only reason I know about the different imprints.
And my experience was really great. They relaunched the book very fast. It switched over. I released the self-pub book in February 22nd of 22, which is not very long ago now.
Right.
And it took longer to do the paperwork than it did to write and release the book. This is true. But still, we had switched over. They'd taken ownership of the ebooks by like June, and then managed a really rapid paperback and hardback relaunch by early November of the same year, which was really fast.
Yeah.
And as part of that, I agreed that I would do a second book also, which I was super sure I knew exactly what it was. And that did not work out so well. But the experience was actually great. And I had a lot of trepidation going into it because I didn't really know what the editorial process would be like. I didn't know how much control I had. I didn't know how collaborative it would be. And it turned out that it was amazing. I really liked working with them. It was very collaborative. There was no, it's my way or the highway approach to things. And at the end of the day, it's just, I think it's all just about the people that you work with. And I just happen to be working with really cool people. My editor in the US is Lindsay Hall. She's amazing. Georgia Summers was my UK editor. She has since left Tor UK to follow her own writing career. And I think she has a book coming out very soon. But yeah, it's been great. And there's all kinds of things that happen in traditional publishing that you can't do in self. I mean, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. I'm just rambling now. I'm going to let you say things.
Well,
no, this
that's
is really
amazing.
encouraging to hear, actually, because we hear so many like different things about like the scary stuff about traditional versus self-pub and how, oh, don't do this and don't do that. So it's really refreshing to hear that you've had a very good experience with both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, it's really a very much lightning strike situation that I'm aware of. The fact that I was initially really successful as a self-pub is really rare. I mean, it is lightning strike stuff. And I think that I very much assume, especially when you listen to podcasts like the Publishing Radio, there is a big disparity in how people's experiences work out in traditional publishing based on their book and how people assume it's going to do and all of these other factors. And so I had a lot of advantages going into the traditional publishing realm in that my book had already been successful and was continuing to be successful. So I think that, there's a certain amount of red carpet that got rolled out that otherwise might not have been there. And I'm really conscious of that. And also conscious of the fact that I didn't necessarily have anything to do with it. I can't pretend like, oh yes, I just planned all this and this is all due to my incredible foresight, because it's not. But at the end of the day, my experience has all been very positive.
That's awesome. I did want to ask, because we do a lot with indie authors. So I wanted to ask if you could tell our listeners kind of what the indie publishing version of Legends and Lattes looked like for you, what you went through with it, and just kind of give them an overview of what it looks like to publish a book through the indie experience.
Sure. And I'll go over it here, but also I'll say that on my website at travisbaldree.com, I wrote up everything.
Yeah, there's a huge Q&A.
There's a huge list of everything from start to finish with links and data and everything from like commissioning the art to getting your ISBNs to going through actually publishing it to going through Ingram Spark to potentially getting in an actual brick and mortar bookstore. I went through everything.
Oh, wow.
And wrote it all down because I'm a super nerd. So if you want detailed data beyond what I can dump here on you in the podcast, you can go check that out.
Of course. Well, and you were part of a role play game process, which usually has lots of writing out. So it's in your background.
So, publishing on Amazon is actually really, really straightforward, especially if you're just doing ebook. If you're doing ebook in print, there's a little bit more to it because you have the full PDF layout that you've got to do for print. I think that my process was I wanted it to be as professional as possible. So I went through a proper editorial process, which I recommend you do as maybe just selfishly as an audiobook narrator who really appreciates getting a manuscript that's edited. But I know readers appreciate this as well. So going through a proper editorial process is a big deal. And if you can't afford one, maybe you can barter one with somebody, because it's really important to the end quality of what you release. And you're kind of stuck with it afterward and the impressions that people have of it afterward. So I went through my editorial process. At the same time, I was commissioning art. And I have a history of commissioning art, so this is probably easier for me because I'm used to it. But for me, it involved going on ArtStation and looking for art that was already in the vein of what I wanted. If you're commissioning art, going out and finding an artist who's good, but isn't doing stuff that looks similar to what you want is a fool's errand, because then you're trying to get them to do something they're not already comfortable doing. So finding somebody who already does something similar to what you want is great. Artists are approachable, but often they won't respond because they're too busy or whatever. So sometimes you just have to keep at it until you find somebody who gives you a bite. I'm also the proponent of paying artists for their time. So be prepared to pay an artist their rate and save up money if you're going to do it. Because I think you get better work when you respect artists and pay them for what they're doing. You want to be paid as an artist, pay other artists what they're worth. I also went the extra mile and paid for commercial rights. If you're commissioning artwork, there's a difference between just commissioning artwork and owning artwork. It usually costs like double to own the full commercial rights, because what a lot of artists will do is after you have commissioned art, you're basically licensing it for use, but you can't like sell it on merchandise or do anything else, because that's a right that they're reserving, an additional revenue that they get after you have licensed the art from them. So when you are buying commercial rights, you're kind of buying out that future money they could have made selling prints or posters or whatever else. So just be cognizant of that. A lot of people still don't buy commercial rights for art. Most traditional publishers don't. They don't bother. But I do, because I like owning art. So I commissioned my artwork, and then I started doing layout kind of in advance. And I wanted my book to look as much like a normal, traditionally published book as possible. I tried about every ebook and print layout thing there is, from Atticus to Vellum to Word conversions to everything else. And at the end of the day, I ended up with Vellum. It was mostly because it's basically bulletproof. Vellum will allow you to lay out your ebook and your print book at the same time, so that you don't have to maintain multiple different projects, and you just hit a button and all of the versions you need get output. And again, it's kind of bulletproof. The stuff that you put out will work. It deals with all your widows and orphans and bizarre free flow problems and everything else. And your ebook is going to work on all the e-readers, and it's going to optimize the art so that it's not too large. One thing you have to contend with if you're releasing ebooks on like Amazon is that you're basically kind of charged for the size of the ebook. That eats into your profits. So smishing any images down as much as possible is important, and it's just going to do it for you. So Vellum. It's also the most expensive option you have to lay out ebooks. It's just the most expensive piece of software, but there's a reason why.
Yeah.
Because it's going to save you untold hours in pain. Right. After that, I asked various authors that I've worked with in the past about pre-orders, setting things up on Amazon, which is what most indie authors are using. And they're mostly because it's the biggest marketplace, is actually really, really easy. It's not hard. It's very straightforward. It doesn't take a lot of time. And the turnaround from like hitting the button, like I want my book to be live, to it being live is like 24 hours. It's just nothing. But I asked authors about things like pre-orders and stuff like that, because I just didn't know. And the advice I got was no longer than 2 weeks. I went a little longer than that for extenuating circumstances, but I think that's probably reasonably good advice. And one of the reasons that it's worth doing a pre-order is because it allows your book to rank before launch day. That's a bit of a double-edged sword. So normally it takes like 48 hours before your Amazon ebook will even show up in the rankings, before it like propagates into the system and has accrued enough data, which means your launch day, if you just push it live on launch day, you just don't rank at all. You're just nowhere. But if you have a really long pre-order, any of the sales that you accrue don't count on launch day toward your rank. It's not like they suddenly magically convert over. So your rank bobbles along, and then launch day happens, and any new purchaser is great. That contributes to your rank, but everything you've done prior doesn't. So keeping it within a certain bound so that you can rank ahead of time, but also don't kind of blow all of these sales that might have given you a good launch day is worth thinking about.
Fine line.
I did mine a little earlier because I tweeted out my cover artwork because I liked it ahead of time, and Seanan McGuire liked it and boosted it, and I got a lot of interest for a book that nobody had read. And I kind of already had everything ready to go. I had my document up on Kindle Desktop Publishing, and I had already finished all my print stuff. I was basically set, barring any last crossing of T's and dotting of I's. So I just decided to put it up for pre-order because I felt like, oh crap, I'm just going to miss out on interest. While at the same time being horrified that people might read the book and decided they hated it after that was all done. And then during that process, during the pre-order, I started sending out arcs. I just put up a Google Docs form that I published on Twitter, and I filled up with arc requests, and I picked ones that I thought were worth my time. If somebody said their favorite genre was splatterpunk, I didn't choose them. And then I got arcs out. And I wasn't really like worried about it. I didn't go the book funnel route. A lot of people use book funnel to distribute their arcs, and I tried, but it mangled my ebook, and then I just gave up. So I just took the ebooks generated by Vellum and just sent them out. Or if people needed a PDF, because some people asked for that, I just sent them the PDF, and I just didn't worry about it. I didn't worry about piracy or people sharing around or whatever, because again, I had no expectations on any of this, and I still would do the same thing. Just people for the most part are nice. And then the book launched, and it did really well. I feel like I've gone through most of the process in a really high level way that still took too long.
Oh no, we love this. This is amazing. I'm a huge, we've been super interested in indie publishing and traditional publishing. So this is all fascinating to us. So
well, and Hannah's a writer herself, so she's like really interested in learning more about this too. So
I'm an unpublished writer, we should say. So.
That's only a temporary state of affairs.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this is really relevant.
One critical thing I would say is that even after doing all this and going through the indie pub process and then going to trad pub, I would still, if I had to go back in time, do the same thing, because I can't imagine going out on submission with it.
Right.
And sitting on it for however long that would take. Because one, I'm not convinced anybody would have picked it up as an agent without the interest already expressed. And two, I'm used to doing things quickly and then finding out if they work and then doing something about it. And I like that kind of working because it doesn't burn your time waiting.
Right.
So I like fail fast, fix, try again. Because if the book had been a disaster, I wouldn't have wanted to wait like a year to find out. I just want to find out, and then there's either something I can fix immediately or there's nothing and I should just write a different book.
Well, especially with your background, I think it's interesting because I like talking about artwork. Like I've had a couple of children's books I wrote for my nieces and nephews where I've had to go find artwork. So I think that's always interesting information that no one knows about until they do a deep dive on it. So it's always important to have people talking about stuff like this. So this is awesome.
Absolutely.
Moving forward to discuss Legends and Lattes as a book, it feels like this hit during a beautiful moment for cozy fantasy as a genre coming forth. Did you kind of know about the lighter fantasy side of things, or was this also something where you kind of just did a deep dive where you were like, this is the right book for me and it just worked in a specific moment?
So I think I'm definitely aware of cozy fantasy. If you look, every Studio Ghibli movie ever made is basically cozy fantasy. I considered Terry Pratchett kind of cozy fantasy, and you've got things like Howl's Moving Castle. This stuff exists in various different forms. There's so much slice of life anime and manga that comes out of Japan too. So I think this all exists, and I certainly didn't spawn cozy fantasy. It's just I think the name got stapled to this book because it's a very specific idea and look and concept that's very easy to associate with the genre. But I wasn't thinking about that at all because I didn't expect anybody to read the book. So I was just writing it to finish a nano and finally finish writing a book. And for me, it originally started as a joke because I read the opposite of this as an audiobook narrator. And I never get to read this kind of stuff. I really like a sweet romance or, a cozy mystery or whatever, but you don't cast people who sound like me to read those things, either because of the protagonist or the tone or whatever. So I was joking, and I, in my Discord where I do a lot of work live, and said I just wanted to read a Hallmark movie set in the Forgotten Realms. And my initial pitch for it was even more joking. It was this dwarven businesswoman has to go back home to save her dad's failing mine in this podunk town, and there's all the goofy townsfolk, and she's very annoyed about it. But also there's somebody ruggedly handsome guy with like a sweater who makes cookies, and it was super tongue-in-cheek.
Were they also high school sweethearts?
Probably. They probably knew it. Yeah, I mean, it was just going to be like just all
and they
in,
saved the town
as
before the
Hallmark
town
movie
festival.
as you could make it, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not what I wrote. But that was the genesis of the idea. But a lot of it was just, I'm just going to write a book that's simple enough that I could finish it. And not worry about what anybody else would think about. Because every other time I tried to write a book, it always had to be like the most important book, or it had to be, you know, like, it had to have all these, it had to be epic. It had to be part of a 3-book series. It had to be 150,000 words. It had to be worthy of me expending all this effort to make the damn thing. And so this is the first time I just said, screw all of that. I don't care. I just want to finish a book. So I'll do a book that I can fit in my brain. And then in retrospect, I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be complicated to be worth anything. It doesn't, you know, I was thinking about video games and I was like, well, Tetris is like one of the most played games of all time. Is there anybody who, as their first programming project, probably doesn't make Tetris? You know, it's that simple that people learning how to program can just make it. It's nothing, but it's also amazing. And why can't simple things be good?
Right. There's one of my favorite television series is BoJack Horseman, and someone talks about how they want to like make pain into books, but then it's like, well, you know, nice books could be fun too. So
Absolutely. Well, I was going to mention, so in my real life, I am a small business owner, and this book, Legends Lattes, is described as being low stakes, but I found myself relating to so many of the situations and thinking, none of these are low stakes. These could make or break this business. What are you people talking about? This is extremely high stakes and a lot of stress. And I was just kind of wondering, like, were you intentionally trying to play with that, like, idea of what's an important situation?
So, I mean, a more accurate title would be like low global stakes, high personal stakes is probably a better way of putting it. But so my initial point was to like, I wanted to do something that was still interesting and mattered to the people who were doing it, but that didn't involve anybody dying. Like beyond past the first sentence, nobody dies and nobody's really under threat of death. And that's just not a motivating factor. So all of the drama had to be things that were like meaningful to someone, a real human being or real person, but weren't like martial. So those were the kinds of things that all made sense. The book is supposed to be kind of like a series of like small braveries that don't involve hitting anything. So it was like switching your job and moving to a new city and trusting people when you aren't used to doing it. And then the last one is like taking a relationship that is a strong friendship and seeing if it's something else. And all of those things are high stakes to the person doing them. Weirdly, they're all like drama that we're all more likely to encounter than like slaying a dragon or saving the universe or whatever. So it feels like, you know, why don't we want to read more about things that are actually likely to happen to us than things that never will? Which is, I think, one of the nice things about using fantasy for that, which is, I think, what works great about Terry Pratchett's work. He's using fantasy to take all of these really human things, you know, like, why does a post office work the way it does? And like the Weird Sisters, where it's talking about like basically issues of female equality. And we're going to use fantasy to remind us that all this stuff is relevant all the time. I don't know. I don't know if I answered that question.
No, that's a
went
great
way
answer.
off road.
Well, and like, not to just tell you how much we loved your book, but like something I love about this book is it is someone moving to a new area. And I've done that a couple of times. And you even discussing like loneliness when you're like stepping away from your family or your structure that you're used to. And like Viv has moments of like, I'm just lonely here. I don't know where to go to eat. I don't know what to do here. And it's like, oh, that's such a realistic view of things. So
it
really
is.
hit
You
it.
go to a new place and all these people here that know each other and you don't know any of them. And like, how do you penetrate that when you're older? When you're a kid, it's just like, you just walk up, hey, you want to be friends? But I made 8 friends today. As an adult, it's like, oh my God, what do I have to do to make a friend?
I just need someone who wants to go see the new movie that's out right now.
Well, and I think too, like this book resonates with so many people, and it's labeled as a cozy fantasy, but I'm almost calling it like an affirmational book, because there's so many sentiments in this book that you're reading and you're just like, I needed to hear that. And I was kind of wondering, do you think that it's important for books to have encouragement and provide readers with a sense of like, you're doing okay, you're on the right path, things will be okay, other people have been through this?
I don't think that all books need to do it, but I certainly think that we all want some books that do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was watching a whole lot of The Great British Bake Off and Fixer Upper during COVID, and both of those basically have drama in them, but they're ultimately, I feel better at the end, and like it reaffirms my belief in other people. Like there's drama in The Great British Bake Off, but ultimately everybody's kind of nice and great. And you're sad when somebody doesn't succeed, but nobody's like the villain. So, but ultimately, I just feel better after watching it. Same thing with Fixer Upper. Hey, it was a terrible building, and now it's amazing. I just like this feeling of that things can be improved, that things can be made better. It's nice to be reminded of that.
They're good universal
absolutely.
shows for everyone. So, well, we know that Legends and Lattes is beautiful, but Laura and I also recently read Bookshops and Bonedust, which we bring ourselves back to Viv. Can you tell us a little bit about Bookshops and Bonedust and what kind of led you back to Viv at a younger age and seeing her in like a different light?
Yeah. So Bookshops and Bonedust is a prequel. It's set about 20 years earlier when Viv is kind of at the start of her adventuring career. She's a very different kind of person than she was in Legends and Lattes. And the book is largely about the seeds that get planted early in life that bloom much later in ways that we don't expect. And I was thinking about it a day or so ago when I was having a conversation. It's kind of about how prequels aren't irrelevant. It's about the fact that just because a relationship isn't the final relationship of your life, the love of your life, that you take a detour somewhere that isn't the way that you ultimately go, they aren't meaningless because they all accrue to make you who you are and let you discover what you do want. And it's also about reading and books and how we recognize each other through stories, and that there are ways of not being alone. This recognition of someone else sharing an experience that you have shared is really, really powerful, which again, I kind of feel ties into this idea of like friendship as adults. It's so hard to find. And it oftentimes feels like there's just nobody out there that shares the same experience that you do. Everybody's off living their perfect life that you see on Facebook, and nobody's going through the same struggles exactly, and you're failing all the time. And that recognition that other people are the same is really powerful, I think. As far as how I got back to writing that book, it wasn't what I was going to write at all. I wasn't going to write a prequel. I was going to write what was basically like fantasy murder, she wrote. And I was super hot to write it. I told Tor what I was going to write. I knew what I was going to write before they even asked me to write anything. And I was just sure it was going to be amazing. And I had a 10,000 word outline, and I wrote like 10 chapters of it. And I discovered I hated it because I'm probably just not much of a mystery writer. Because for me, the effort of making sure that people are where they need to be and that the clue gets found and that the mystery functions crowded out all the things I cared about, the moments with characters and relating to these people. And so I clearly wasn't ready to write it. So I was terrified. And then I starting over, and Bookshops and Bonedust is the third restart.
Oh, wow.
I discovered that I basically have to have some like core emotional like ache, like some moment from that I've experienced where I had to like make a decision and I agonized over it and I didn't know which way things were going to work as like the core of the book, because that's what gets me to write it. I also had a thing that I hope I don't have to experience exactly that way again, which is that I couldn't tell if I felt bad about the first attempt at a book because there was something wrong with it, or because it was the first time I was writing, laboring under any expectations. I just didn't know. I didn't know which fear that was.
Yeah.
Because I had never experienced either of them.
Right.
So it took those 3 restarts to be able to separate them in my mind and understand which one was which.
Yeah.
So I still, abject terror that people won't like the book, but I liked it. And I was able to pull those apart, which is how I made it to the end.
Well,
Well,
just so you
we
know,
love it.
yeah, I loved it. This was actually my first experience with Viv, as I told you off mic, but so I really enjoyed this book, and I loved because I got to see Viv younger first and then older. I felt like you had a great way of having a young woman's tone versus like the older woman who's like kind of been through it all and seen the
Just
other
kinda come
side.
into her own.
Yeah. And you did a really great job at like having each part of Viv have her own unique voice while being the same person. So what was that process like for you of like discovering Viv at different times in her life?
Honestly, it was pretty natural. I felt like I knew who she was. There's a lot of me in Viv because she's had a lot of similar life experiences. I was a person in my 40s who did the same job for 20 years and I was pretty good at it, but I was tired of it. So I switched and I went to a new industry and there was all these amazing people there. And I was like, where was this? And she does the exact same thing. I didn't realize this until halfway through writing Legends Lattes, but it's in retrospect, it's obvious. So I find her voice really easy to get into. She tends to be straightforward. She generally tries to say what she means. She's impatient with misunderstandings. And she's not so young that I can't remember being that way, which helps me a lot.
Yeah.
Also, as a narrator, it's really, really helpful when you can already hear everybody in your head. Yeah. I find it's really helpful because their voice and the way that they speak tells you so much about them. So much can be delivered in dialogue that I find that's a really great way for me to understand people.
So you're saying a little more of the sarcasm and quips that we get in Bookshops and Bonedust. Maybe it's a little more of Travis than.
Well, it's definitely younger
Lattes.
Travis. Younger Travis was definitely more sarcastic and a little bit more impatient, a little more caustic. Not to the extent, or maybe more to the extent than she is. Honestly, I was probably considerably more impatient and caustic as a young person. And I will probably blush thinking about everything about being younger.
This is an audio format. Blush away.
But don't we all have some embarrassment for our younger selves?
So much.
So in Bookshops and Bonedust, the characters are often challenging preconceived notions and even thoughts that they have of themselves. Why is this something that resonates with you as an author?
As a person, it feels like something that's ongoing all the time. It's like, it feels like, you start your life, you're going to figure things out. But honestly, it feels like you're just perpetually figuring things out. Mm-hmm. You figure out something out about yourself that has been long held as just the way that you are. And you're like, why am I that way? Why am I doing this? Why do I do this over and over in my life? What the hell is wrong with me? And you try and untangle it and figure it out. And as soon as you do, there's something else. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a hot mess, but I generally feel that I'm an ongoing hot mess that's having to untangle why I am the way I am. And often, even if I can think my way into why I am the way I am, I can't. I really have a difficult time changing the way I feel. Like I can say, oh, well, I do this and I feel this way because X and X happened. And all of this accrued experience over time results in this. I don't really want to feel that way anymore. And I know why I do. Why can't I just stop feeling that way? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Again, I went off-road, but.
Oh, that's not off-road. That was like
super relatable because I often find myself feeling like I'm going into a tunnel to discover some answers about myself and then discovering it's one of those parachutes that you're just trying to slap off yourself. So
yes, I too am an overanalyzer of oh, I know exactly why I have all the reactions I have. I still can't stop them, but at least I know and I can tell you why.
Very frustrating.
Yeah.
So there's a situation in Bookshops and Bonedust where Viv has a conversation with another character about reframing their thinking. Mm-hmm. How did you have to reframe your thinking when writing this book compared to Legends Lattes?
Well, I knew I wanted to. One of the challenges of it was I wanted to write a book that felt familiar without writing the same book. Mm-hmm. So it just couldn't be about the same things. But trying to figure out the thing that I wanted to talk about that would still kind of like interlock with it in some way, while still hopefully having some of the same effect. Ultimately, I want you to feel better at the end of it. And the book is more bittersweet than the first book, although I think the epilogue resolves some of that. You get like a little, you get like a little bit of a catch at the end.
Oh, you mean the part where I cried? Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Figuring out how to tell a story that felt like it belonged without repeating itself for me was kind of challenging. And I guess it took looking at the character in a different way, which is probably part of the reason that I took her to a different time, so that there would be a reason for her to be for those differences, so that her perspective could be different. So I had to move her in order to move me, I guess.
That's a good way. Yeah, I love that. I know that like Bookshops and Bonedust has a little bit more like of the adventure side of things when it comes to things other than Legends. I mean, Legends and Lattes is adventurous because it's opening a small business, as Laura said, and that could be very serious work. But did you have fun like building a little bit more of the adventure and doing a little bit more of the world building on like creatures and bad guys and everything in Bookshops and Bonedust? And
I
what
did.
was that like?
I like that stuff a lot. I like that stuff a lot. I have a long history of fantasy properties from doing like games in fantasy, and I read a lot of fantasy and I narrate a ton of fantasy. I mean, I like fantasy.
Yeah.
And the first book was very much like, I'm just going to bring the fantasy world to you, and there shouldn't have to do any work to get there because it's really supposed to be comfortable. And then the second one, because she's younger and because she's still into it, then you should have a little bit of a taste of it. I like writing fight scenes. There's not a lot of call for fight scenes in cozy fantasy, but I like them, and I got to do a little bit of fight scenes. Yeah. So I appreciated being able to do that. Also, it feels like now that I've written one book, I can start to fill in some of the edges with things that I think are unique to my world. I only hinted at a few of them in the other book because, again, I didn't want to bog it down with world building, which wasn't relevant to what Viv cared about. But I get to keep kind of doodling in the margins and adding more things, and it's fun to do that. One of the things I really like about Terry Pratchett's work is that you can read these books in any order, but as you read his books and they all start to pile up, you get this clearer and clearer sense of the world and all of the details packed in it that you definitely wouldn't have from just reading one book. But you're not obligated to do that, which I really like. And so much fantasy, I think, is front-loaded, where it's designed to make sure that you ingest everything you can about this world so you can properly appreciate everything that's going to come after. And I don't really like that as a storytelling method. I like most of my world building to be character out. Like, here's the character and here's what they see in the world and here's why it's relevant to their experience. And that's how I get my world building. So having the opportunity to do that is pretty nice.
That's awesome.
Well, going off of like your just like world building and the different things you have to do between the books, one thing that I appreciate is that you have like a talent for describing things, but not overly describing them. Like the way that you describe food and places, it's just enough. And I've read books before where authors will like go on for entire pages about an outfit or how something tasted. I'm like,
yeah,
can we move on?
I really appreciate that you noticed, because I'm really
but I
sensitive
just wondering if
it.
it's difficult for you to do.
At this point, no. Largely because, okay, so one of the advantages of reading other people's books out loud is that it very much clarifies exactly what you like and don't like and why. Because when you read things to yourself, like if you're reading like the descriptions of the clothes, and you can just skim it, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, no more candlesticks, don't care about the rugs. Okay, we're back to people talking. Cool. I can't do that. So I have to give it all the energy that everything else gets. And if it's not for you as a reader, you notice. So I am not a fan of lore dumps or location dumps. I call it like the silverware problem. Like, I walk into a room and you're telling me about the silverware. Why? What do I care? I want to know what these people think and are doing. I just don't care. To me, it almost feels like a lot of times like a desperate attempt to make you believe the world. Like it's trying too hard, so that there's almost like an uncanny valley where you packed in so much detail that I don't believe any of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm really sensitive to it at this point. I mostly want books to get on with it, and I really don't like wasted words. So when it comes time to edit and stuff leaves, if it's puffy, I'm like, okay, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't
if
miss
it
it,
helps,
it should be gone.
if it helps for background context, Laura and I had read very little fantasy before we started the podcast, and our first foray was the Wheel of Time series. And it was a very unique experience
where
for
it's
both
like
of us.
prologue is 500 pages.
So,
Like,
Yep.
so
I
we
can't
always
hear
like
about how this woman's outfit looks for any much longer.
yeah. So we've learned more and more about fantasy, and it's very exciting to find just the right amount of description where it's like, I totally know where I am in this world, but I'm not like learning about the silverware, as you said.
One of the authors I narrate for, Will White, who writes the Cradle series, which is tons of fun, is really, really great at this.
Okay.
He's got really lean writing. There's no words wasted. And all of his characters really do have incredible personalities that are delivered mostly with dialogue and really succinct action. And it's just really fun to read. And as a result, the image that you get of those things is actually clearer because that's all you get. So everything's really just pops. I don't know. I love it.
No, I think that's a good thing for other writers to know, where it's like, oh, you don't need too much scene setting. Because as someone who I take my writing to a critique group, and sometimes they'll be like, I just wish you told me more about the landscape. And I'm like, I don't really care about the landscape. I think you could look up a picture.
Yeah,
I just don't need to know.
Yeah,
I just don't need to know.
I do need to know something about the landscape, though.
Okay.
So in Bookshops and Bonedust, I get a lot of Pacific Northwest vibes, and you are from the Pacific Northwest. Do you think that kind of influenced the setting?
It's definitely got some of it, because it's kind of like, if you look at areas like Port Townsend and stuff like that, it's got sandy beaches and kind of like these big scrubby hills. There's also a little bit of like an East Coast, like New England beach town kind of vibe to a certain extent, but it's clearly stormier and a little more overcast. So it's probably definitely got a good chunk of Pacific Northwest in there.
Awesome. I did want to ask, because over the course of the two books, we see some fun characters. Was there a character that you particularly struggled to find their voice with, or was there a character that came so easily to you, besides Viv, which we heard had a lot about you in them? But
oh God, honestly, this is going to sound dumb, but characters usually they form up pretty quick in my brain, and maybe that's because of the voices. But in general, I kind of have a rule, is that if I have a character, I feel like they could have been a main character in something. So I usually don't include them if I don't feel like they've got some meat on their bones, for the most part. Like I would love to do a book about Fern. I would love to do a book about Iridia. I even think, Brand the bartender would do just fine if he had a book. I care about what happened to him. Because I have a sense of what these people sound like and look like, and maybe the weight of what got them there. Somebody asked me about if I knew the history of all my characters, like Tandri, for instance, from Legends Lattes. And my answer was that it's kind of like if you had furniture with a sheet over it. Like you've got a big pile of furniture. You can see the shape of it. You don't know exactly what the chair looks like, but you have the general gist of the shape. And most characters are like that for me. I have a general gist of the shape of their life up to where they got. If the time came, I'd twitch back the sheet and I'd be like, oh, yep, that's a green sofa, and there's an old wooden rocking chair or whatever. But I would have known roughly where those things were and kind of how they impacted them.
Right. Well, that was going to be my next question, of if there was a character who you got to do another one-off shoot, which one would it be? But it kind of sounds like any one of them would be a happy moment.
I feel like
you
could have fun with lots of them. Even in Bookshops and Bonedust, there's like a little bit where Maylee is talking about a previous experience that she has with this little goblin across the river. That little goblin across the river is maybe a character in another book that would be like the main character. Like I know who she is, and she's pretty cool, and her name is Zill, and she ends up, anyway, she really likes pockets.
As do I, so I'm a big fan.
For pre-order now.
That's awesome. No, I love that you are able to build those characters out and kind of see them for, different characters in the story that are all main characters.
That's amazing. You have the names and everything. So in these books, the characters are drawn to kindness and helping each other without reward. It's just because. And I got the impression that you wrote this because it was you rooting for your characters and wanting them to make good connections and succeed? Was that kind of your intent?
Um, I want to write characters that I want to know in a lot of ways. And it doesn't mean that I like every character is my favorite, or I don't think that they have problems or issues. Like the Madrigal, for instance, in Legends and Lattes. We're kind of spoiling, but the book's been out for a while. Anyway, she's ostensibly like a bad guy, right? And I don't really agree with her motivations for doing things. She's basically kind of like a ruthless gentrifier, more or less.
Yes.
And I have a lot of problems with that. But also I can see why she's trying to do what she's trying to do. She's taking a crappy part of town, and she's just, having exhausted any other means of doing so, by hook or by crook, she's going to turn it into something nicer. That's not always great, and it has impacts on other people and whatever. So I don't agree with her, but I can like things about her. Also, in the movie, she would be played by Helen Mirren. But
she would be played by Helen Mirren.
I've even forgotten what the question now is. I started answering it in like a perpendicular.
Just wondering, like, how if you're like rooting for your characters when you're writing them.
And I am. I'm rooting for them to find what they want. To get to a place where they find what they want, where they're peaceful. And they might not end up there, but maybe they take a few steps on the way.
Well, in fact, it seems like some of the worst characters in these books, like the Madrigal, like you can disagree with the Madrigal and you can not like what she's doing, but you could tell that she has like a sense of pride and of capability and of like, I don't want to be surrounded by terrible people. So like I might do terrible things, but like overall, I'm trying towards some sense of good. And the worst people are the ones whose motivations are just like self-servicing, like
ultimately selfish.
Yeah.
Finis is relentlessly, he's broken. He's jealous of whatever anybody else has. No matter what he has, he's always jealous of what somebody else has. And I've known a lot of people like that. And it's a sucky way to be. And, you can feel for them, but also they're so destructive because they're so willing to tear down what other people build so that they feel like what they built is a little taller.
Well, and it sounds like it's a little bit of what you said in Legends and Lattes, where it's like finds like. So like you like these types of characters, so you build these types of characters. So
one of the things I think is neat about it, and I kind of was worried about, is that they don't all feel like the same character. You can have people who are nice and want good things and ultimately want to be good people, and they don't all have to be the same. They don't feel monolithic.
Well, not everybody has the same motivations, so it makes the characters more interesting and deeper.
Well, I think I had a misapprehension when I was younger that people who were kind were honestly kind of simple. Like they just didn't see how the world was. They weren't being realistic or whatever. And I didn't realize until I got older that being kind is an act of will and work, and it is ongoing forever. And that there's a lot of bravery to being kind. It's not just because you're a doofus and you don't see that the world is hard. It's that you understand that the world is hard and you commit to refuting it. And so I didn't have real respect for that when I was younger, and now I do. And I want to be that way, and I want to find people who also want to be that way.
Right.
Have you been able to look at some of the fan art and cosplaying that people have done? And do you like looking at it, or is it something you're embarrassed by?
Oh yes, it's amazing. It's the coolest thing ever. I have a giant folder. There are tattoos. There is art. There is some people have made miniatures of the coffee shop. Somebody made a custom Lego set with custom minifigs and sent it to me with glossy fold-out printed instructions on how to assemble it. It's sitting right over there. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
I will never get tired of it. It's incredible. And I don't feel like I'm deserving of it. I just think it's so amazing that I'm just happy to be in the room because it's super cool. What's weird is I've made really popular video games. It's not the same thing. It's just not. Because there's something so much more personal about something that you wrote. Again, it's part of the thing that's going on in Bookshops and Bonedust when you see somebody else through a book, this idea of shared experience. When somebody likes something that you wrote or relates to it, they don't even have to like it, just relates to something that you wrote. It's like we get each other. We understand each other, and it's very, very weirdly potent. And when people make art, it's like an extension of that. It's like a further expression of that. It's just hard not to be, wiggle your fingers and go, oh my God, this is amazing.
Well, there's also this concept of the right thing happening at the right place and time in Bookshops and Bonedust. So how do you feel about the timing of your books?
Totally fortuitous, and I had nothing to do with it, basically. I think that in any other year, the book wouldn't have landed the way that it landed, and the response wouldn't have been the same. I think that everybody being trapped indoors for years with COVID and like appreciating just how much real in-person connection with other people meant to them. Everybody's exhausted with Zooms by that point. Nobody wants to be on another damn Zoom. I just want to go to a coffee shop and see somebody else's face and sit for 10 minutes. That's like escapist fantasy right then. So I know that it benefited from that. And then you take other things that are going on at the same time, which again, I had nothing to do with, like the popularity of Critical Role, D&D as like a social thing that people actually do now, fantasy being accepted in that way. And then all of like the popular media that comes before that, The Witcher, Game of Thrones, taking classical fantasy and popularizing it in a way that it never has been before. So all of those things intersect, and okay, this book works for now. Lucky me.
You're over here with your Lego sets. You're like,
I
guess
like,
this is happening.
I don't know how I ended up here. It's really cool. I'm very grateful, and I'm not going to pretend that I had anything to do with it.
That's awesome, though. I like, as a final thing about the books, kind of, or unless Laura has more, but like, what was it like kind of developing two different types of romances over the course of both of them? Because small spoilers, there is romance in Bookshops and Bonedust, but like, how is it making two different things, especially when you talked a little bit about earlier with like prequels, how prequels matter, how prior relationships matter and everything? Because I didn't know how it would end in the prequel, but I was very, it was very fun and bittersweet, like you said.
Yeah. So when I wrote Legends and Lattes, I didn't initially know there was going to be romance. I knew that we were going to have a really incredible friendship, that was the point of it. These two people finding each other and coming to this realization that they filled in for each other in ways that they hadn't experienced before. And about halfway through, I was like, oh, also, yes, it's absolutely ultimately going to be romantic, but instead of being a kind of a classic, oh, I'm infatuated and then romance and understanding comes afterward, it would be the reverse. It would be like a dawning realization, and it would be built on friendship and support first, which to me, as somebody in their 40s, that's the kind of relationships that I feel like are appealing at this point.
Oh, yeah.
So that made sense to me. And then with the second book, what I wanted to do was explore why she would value that kind of relationship, and what would make her the kind of person who would value it, and who would be hesitant and wouldn't just like jump right into the sack with somebody or be like infatuation first. And it was because she had this relationship, which she was kind of a little flippant about. Ultimately, it was meaningful to her, but it wasn't as meaningful to her as it was to Maylee.
Right.
And that the way the growing empathy that she had for others after having to take this detour and spend this time sitting in one place instead of moving from, brief window of relationship to brief window of relationship, would give her appreciation for how somebody else felt. And then that kind of almost echoes back. And that's, oh, wait, I feel these things too and didn't expect to. And that's like the foundation of ultimately the most important relationship she ever has. And so it's super important relationship because it eventually allows her to understand that.
I think that's a very unique experience that we don't often see in books. Because like, this is a huge complaint I have about books where it's like, oh, the first person you fall in love with that you see is definitely the only person you've ever loved ever. And so I thought this was very unique to kind of see like how different types of relationships play out and how they can be meaningful, but not meaningful in the like forever and ever after kind of thing.
This happens in every like fantasy, like the first time somebody shows up who's a potential like romantic interest, they're clearly going to be the one at the end. Usually it's maybe the first person they see in the narrative.
Obviously. Yes, it just has to be.
Just has to be.
Yeah. Which for Viv would have been Cal. So,
Yeah.
very different relationship.
Very different. Grumpy
Can I
uncle.
ask if you have a actor in mind for Melee?
Um,
If you were to fan cast.
who would I choose for Melee? That's actually hard. I have
Because
an
I have
actor,
a
think, for most of
suggestion
them.
if you don't.
I want to hear. I want to hear.
Okay. If you have watched Rings of Power, the actor
Yes.
that plays Disa, Sophia Namvetti, she is
She's
who I was picturing in my
The
mind.
Dwarven Queen.
Yes.
She would totally do that. She would actually do great at that.
I thought she was amazing in that show, and that's who I was picturing all throughout the book. I was like, this has got to be her.
That works. That works.
Do you have any? Well, you said you have actors or actresses for other people. Can you list out a couple for us?
So I would say that like Tandri is Ana de Armas. I don't know if I said her name right.
Okay.
I would say that Viv, when she's younger, is oh crap. Her name is shoot. I can't remember her name. She's super buff, and she was in
The Mandalorian.
she was in The Mandalorian. Yes, short hair.
Yes. Oh gosh.
Katie. It's a mix something, and I'm lost.
I'm
it.
Googling
Laura
it now.
is our resident Star Wars
But I'm
fan, so she
picturing
knows.
That's the young Viv. That's young Viv. Shoot.
Katie
not-
O'Brien. O'Brien. Yes.
Yes,
Elia
Katie
Kane.
O'Brien. Katie O'Brien.
Elia Kane. Yeah.
Is young Viv, I think.
Oh
in my
yeah,
brain.
she would do excellent. I pulled up a photo of her, and
She would
that's
rock it.
definitely
Mhm.
that's a young Viv right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, she would rock it. Oh shoot. What's his name? I'm gonna find it real quick.
You're fine. Laura can edit out any searching to make you seem really smart if you really want.
I'm gonna be really, really fast on this.
You got this off the top of your head.
Weirdly, I think old Dominic Monaghan would be a really good cow.
Ooh,
Like Dominic Monaghan at his current age
okay.
would be a really good cow.
Okay.
Again, I already said Helen Mirren for
Yes.
the Madrigal.
Helen Mirren is
Uh,
perfect, and the perfect like strict person who walks into a room and changes the energy of it immediately.
And obviously, Thimble and Fern are all about the voice. So yeah, Fern especially. And I don't know who Fern's voice would be, just to swear really convincingly, but charmingly.
Mm-hmm. I would suggest my grandma, but you haven't heard her voice.
She will be applying once the movie hits.
I can send you an audio clip.
Sorry for taking you down that rabbit hole. It was just we were talking about it, and I was like, "Well, you have to have others if you already have Helen Mirren right off the top of the dome." But
So I guess my last couple questions are just like in relation to narrating, and
Okay.
if you had any advice for people wanting to get into narration.
There is a website called narratorsroadmap.com that has scads of information that will help you get kind of a handle on the particulars. But the first thing you should do is go sit in a walk-in closet for an hour and read out loud and make sure you like it. Because if you don't, you should not be a narrator. It's like anything, you can practice and get better at it. Having a good intuitive sense of language, I think, is really important, because a lot of narrating is kind of predictive. You're assuming where the author is going to go with a sentence based on what you understand about language. Having a good sense of comic timing is like really important. Having like that intuitive sense of the timing of language, because pace is an enormous part of it. And apart from that, it's just sitting down and listening to a lot of audiobooks and understanding how to make people go along with the story, how to figure out what the author is trying to do and make sure that you are along for the ride, that you're making sure that what they're attempting is what people are hearing. And if you can't figure out what the author's trying to do, that's generally going to be problematic for you. You'll end up with kind of a monotone read or an off-tone read because you won't realize what's going on. So there's a certain amount of analysis of text and intuition that's important to it.
And do you have
But
like
it's
a
awesome.
dream series or character to narrate?
I have always wanted to narrate a Stephen King book. Always.
Oh,
I would love to
Okay.
hear that.
He writes in a way that is really excellent read aloud. One of my favorite narrators of all time, the sadly departed Frank Muller, narrated a lot of Stephen King's work early on. And I loved his narration and how well it paired with that work. So I probably have a certain amount of like deep-seated need to follow in his footsteps that way. But yeah, I think they're amazing read aloud. And they're books that have a lot of great dialogue. They're very human.
Oh yeah, Stephen King is like classic at being able to write small town vibes and interactions with people. So
nothing really even has to be happening. I can just read about these people talking
Oh, yeah.
about stuff, and I'm into it. So I am all aboard.
I read it via audio because I was a huge scaredy cat. And so I was like, I can't sit down and read in quiet. I need someone telling me what's happening.
Stephen Weber.
Yeah. And it was an excellent way to read it for the first time. So I could totally understand that. Can I ask, like, do you have a moment of narration that's just like supremely funny to you where you were reading something and you had to get into a passage that was weird for you, or any strange tales of being a narrator?
What's one I can say?
I do understand you have to be careful about what you say.
Are they moist or spicy? Is that what you're thinking?
Sometimes authors tell you more than I think they're telling you. And it becomes really like apparent, like that you can't not put yourself into the books. And sometimes this may be something you didn't want to reveal. So there have been some incredibly unintentionally sexual and phallic things that repeated over and over in a few books that I was ultimately just kind of dying on. And I will not name the books or the passages. But it happens. And sometimes you just get funny, when people have misspellings of prostrate as prostate. Certain circumstances make that really, really hysterical. Unintentionally used words are sometimes really, really funny. But yeah.
Those are good moments. Thank you.
Then one last question for me, at least. Bookshops and Bonedust is all about like falling in love with reading. So do you have a book that made you fall in love with reading or get back into reading?
I mean, I had a lot of things that I read as a kid that I really sparked things for me, whether it was The Hobbit or Dune or something else. This idea of other places, was initially that's what got me into reading, was like just these worlds seem so real. And when you're young, you're like, I really could go there. Like there's a chance. And so there's this really powerful attraction to that kind of fantasy for me when I was younger. And then over time, what I wanted out of books evolved. But that was what initially drew me, was and it's stuff like the series that nobody's ever heard of, like Freddie the Pig. For God's sake, I've read a lot of Freddie the Pig. Nobody's ever heard of this book, not now. And one of my favorite books, Nicobobanus, written by Terry Jones, who was part of Monty Python. It's just so, it's so bizarre. I don't know. A lot of them books always felt a little transgressive. There's like, I'm getting away with something by getting to read this. Which, as when I was a kid, was also really powerful for me. Like, ha ha ha, my parents don't know I'm reading this. They wouldn't like that. Nicobobanus has, pirate monks, and there's a scene where they're eating offal, and it's just like, my parents would be so upset.
I think I did get grounded once for reading books where my parents were like, that was inappropriate for you to read at this age.
Super inappropriate.
No, that's awesome. Well, Travis, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about your journey into publishing and through these two books that we both love so much. Can we
pick them up if you haven't already, and
yes,
pre-order Bookshops and Bonedust, request at your library, do it now.
But before we do an outro and to have everyone learn where they can find you, could you tell us what you're reading, watching, and or enjoying right now?
I just finished The West Passage by Jared Pekacek. I have probably said his last name wrong. Jared, I apologize, which is it's got heavy duty Gormenghast vibes. It's super weird and cool, and I really loved it. In the occasional brief moments I have for it, I've been playing Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Nice.
And what did I watch recently? I've been watching a little bit of Star Trek Strange New Worlds when I can get a chance.
I'm the resident Star Trek person, so I need to get into that. So we have Star Wars and Star
charming.
Trek, all things covered. So, well, again, thank you. Everyone, make sure you're pre-ordering Bookshops and Bonedust, and you're picking up Legends and Lattes, or read them in the reverse order like I did. So you guys can be doing that. And then Travis, can you tell everyone where to find you?
I am on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. It's always Travis Baldree. I always just use my name. And yeah, I refuse to say anything but Twitter. I'm on Twitter. So
yeah, we've been doing our outro, and we're still on that one location for as long as we are able.
Yeah, I'm riding this ship beneath the waves.
Yeah, exactly. It has some people that we really like who we talk to all the time right there. It's hard to find them on other locations, so we will still be there.
Yeah, I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads and whatever, but I can only juggle so many things to type text into.
That's very, very fair. Well, everyone, follow him on all platforms, pre-order, and just make sure you're sending him all of your custom Lego sets, because he will accept
exactly. More, I will take it.
All the artwork.
All the artwork. And thank you all. Make sure you're following our pod as well, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.